Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Trap on the Boom and Bust channel, a Bears podcast by a Bears fan. I'm your host, Terry, and today talking real quickly about Chuck Pagano and kind of what a new defensive scheme means for us. So I had a few people I talked to just kind of talking through the logistics of what it means to have a new scheme. And so, I figured I'd just go ahead and kind of talk about what are the different aspects of a defensive scheme and, what things that could affect on our unit. And so, just kind of going to go into the X's and O's for it. I mean, I know I got a number of lovely fans that love to tell me I know nothing about football, but they seem to be absent when we go into these type of episodes. But anyway, my voice is a little hoarse. I've lost my voice for a few days, so kind of bear with me. I hope it's not too bad. But anyway, so going into a defensive scheme and talking about what the logistics of that means. So the big thing that a lot of people talked about is that Chuck Pagano runs a 3-4. We were in a 3-4 with Fangio, so we're all good. We're not switching systems. Now, up front, the 3-4, the 4-3, the 46 defense, the 3-3-5, 4-2-5, whatever you want. That's just linebackers, D-line, and defensive backs. The front isn't your whole entire scheme. And not talking down to any fans, there's some fans that don't know that. They just know that level of it. But it's not your entire scheme. And so when you're talking about switching a scheme, what are you really switching? Well, there's a couple things. On its basic front, or the basic overlook, I should say, the defense is very less complicated than the offense. With the offense, there's a lot more variables. And since you have more variables, that equals more combinations, simple math. But with defense, it really boils down to what zone am I covering? What man am I covering? Or what gap am I responsible for? And so the two things, run game, pass game, that's kind of two things you can do. In the run game, it just comes down to gaps. Simple and plain. Who has the A gap, or who has the play side A gap, weak side A gap, play side B and C, and, on and so forth. You got the alley, which is kind of, if you think about a receiver and a inline tight end, the space in between them where the slot lines up, that's the alley. And then you also got the force, which is usually the corner because it's the widest man. And the force is to force it back inside to where the rest of the defense is. So you got the typical run fits, and then you got in zone, you got the typical zones, the flat, the deep, you got the curl, you got the hook, whatever, people use different terms. Some people say hook, some people say hole. Same thing. It's basically, if you cut the field in thirds, cover 3, you got the deep thirds. Cover 4 quarters, you got the quarters. If you go cover 2, it's the deep halves, whatever. You're defending the deep area. You're defending anything short in the flat. You're defending anything in the curl, which is medium. And then, you're defending the middle of the field where the linebackers are. So that's kind of the basic examples. And so whatever coverage you call, whatever blitz you call, whatever stunt you call, that pretty much dictates what your coverage areas are going to be for a particular player, and it's going to dictate who has which gap. In a base front, we assign the gaps normally. Linebacker has this, whatever. But when you're talking about blitzes and stunts, that's when gaps can change. So even if we blitz or stunt on a run, you should be in your right gap. We should all be gap sound. And so those are kind of really the aspects that you look at when you're talking about, the components of a defense. So it's not as complicated as an offense. But my thing is, when you're talking about a scheme, the biggest thing is philosophy, and philosophy dictates what you do when it's time to make a decision. And so, that could be anything. And, when you're talking about somebody deciding to go for 2 instead of 1 for the win, that goes to the philosophy. When you're in doubt, you go back to what it is you establish as your brand, and that kind of helps decisions. But with defense, the things that it really helps you to understand is what type of blitzes we will do and type of gambles we will do with those blitzes, and when we want to do those blitzes, who we blitz. It dictates what type of coverage you like to run, what type of style you like to do, whether it's press or anything of that nature. And so when you're talking about bringing in a new defensive coordinator, a lot of things can change. And so it all matches up with your personnel. A good coach changes up the strategy and the philosophy with the personnel of the team, but not everybody does that. Some people try to force, a round shape into a square hole, and then eventually get rid of those players to get people that work with what they got. Or you got people that are more adaptable and can play to their strengths. So the Bears playing as well as they did this last season, there's a case to be made. Hey, look at what Fangio did and just replicate it. But the fact is, that's not how the sport goes. That's not how all coaches are. I don't know Chuck Pagano personally, so I can't tell you what he's going to do. Some coaches, as I've said before, if you're going to get fired, you're going to get fired doing it your way. And so some people just do what they're going to do. So we'll see. And I wish I could tell you more, but again, I don't have his playbook, but the things that can change, can vary across the board. And that's from the way we use Mac and Leonard Floyd, especially in the 3-4. Some people, have very specific ideas of what they want to do with their outside linebackers. Typically, your strong side linebacker is in there on rundowns, and then you take them out on pass downs, bring in an extra DB, and now you got a 4-man front to rush the passer and an extra DB to help cover. And then that weak side outside backer is always rushing the passer. Some people like to use them interchangeably. Some people like to use them more in coverage. What we did is we allowed Mac to rush most of the time, but Leonard Floyd play his hand in coverage. It could be totally different with Chuck Pagano. And also from there, then you're talking about how you use the corners and their alignment. Now again, there's only so many coverages you can do, but your alignment to me is very big. How you decide to line your corners up, whether it's press and on the line, or whether it's off coverage, or whether it's inside leverage where you're kind of giving up the outside, but then also in marriage with the alignment is the coverage. So if it's cover 2 and my corners got flat, some people want to line them up 5 yards off and give you cushion so they can jump any passes and then play the flat. Some people, if it's cover 2 and we playing a flat, I just want to put my corners up there right now and let them press you and make it hard as possible. So there's a lot of different combinations you can do. Again, not as complicated as offense, but it still is a lot that can be tweaked. So it's going to come down to the philosophy of Chuck Pagano and what he wants him and his staff to do. And again, I've mentioned before, if you're just looking historically, because people forget, he was only a coordinator for 1 year with Baltimore. People act like, some people talk as if he was there for years and years as a coordinator. He was there as a coordinator 1 year. But you look at historically with them and then the Colts, as far as differences, he does like to play bump and run press more than we did with Fangio, and he likes to blitz more than we did with Fangio. We're one of the least blitzing teams in the league. And so, with our pass rushers, as I said before, we have to manufacture pressure. meaning that it's not going to be natural with the 4 or 3 guys that were rushing. Matt can do his own thing, but outside of that, we're going to need different stunts, gimmicks and blitzes. Like, if you just go straight head up to, rush, that's going straight. But to manufacture pressures when you do stunts in games, different twists, and then you do different blitzes, of course. And so, it can be very different. Even with blitzing, you're talking about we blitz the nickel corner a lot, which is safe because you line up the nickel corner, has natural outside leverage, and it looks like they're in coverage until the snap, and then they're flying off the edge, and then you could easily have a safety walk down or linebacker bump out and replace that coverage. Now, a team that likes to do straight corner blitzes, or they like to do safety blitzes, that's a whole different alignment. That's a whole different look. That's a whole different angle. And it's not that it can't be done. It's just different than what we've seen. And so there's a number of things that can change with what we do and who we use to do it. And so that's something that's that you're gonna have to look out for. And even down to the stunts. Like I said, we were heavy stunt. Like a lot of times we do a TE or ET stunt, basically where the outside end crashes inside and, inside guy loops outside. We do a lot of that stuff. Pagano might not be into that stuff. He might be straight up rush and straight up blitz and, more exotic. Or there's, at time when the Patriots did that amoeba defense, as they called it, where you got one guy on the nose and then everybody else is standing up and moving around. You don't know who's coming. So there's a lot of different ways to play it. And, this was just kind of giving the idea to fans who might not know the intricacies of what different areas that you can play with and what our defense might change. So you're talking about with secondary, you're talking about the coverage, of course, but you're talking about the alignment. To me, I think the corners we have right now, Prince and Kyle, they're press guys. They can play physical at the line, but, we played a lot of off coverage with Fangio that might change. You talk about safety alignment. A lot of times we cheated the strong safety up and had the free safety Eddie Jackson playing back because he could cover. Okay, that might change as well. The defensive line, again, what do you do with the stunts in the games and the movement? And so what that might change. So there's so many things that might change, but again, that's just kind of give you an idea of those different areas. So anyway, that's kind of it. So you go to comment section, kind of talk about Pagano and what you think might change, what might not, what you expecting with Pagano and Fangio leaving. And yeah, just share it around, get the convo started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, stay up and bear down.